Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our final sustainability lunch series of the fall semester. We are so excited to be welcoming back one of our amazing alumni, Juliana Kerrest. She's a 2017 grad, sustainability certificate grad, and dual degree grad from MIT and HKS. Facilitating today's conversation are two amazing first-year students. We have Nisha Patel, first-year MBA and part of SEID, Andrew Epstein, a first-year LGO and also part of SEID and the sustainability community. Before we get started with today's conversation, just a quick pitch that we're going to be hosting an ecosystem mixer on December 12th over at the Lock Bar. If you haven't yet RSVP'd, it might be closed out. It's up on Sloan Groups, but we're going to open up a few more slots. So if you're interested in joining us before you head out for winter break, please do so. And before I hand the microphone over to our two students, just a land acknowledgement that MIT Sloan sits on the land previously acknowledged by the Wampanoag Nation. So we want to acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of this territory and memorialize this land in which we now gather. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our two students to start today's conversation.
Cool. Can you guys hear me okay? Is the mic coming through? All right, and Juliana, can you hear me as well? Perfect. All right, well, great. Thanks so much for being with us today. We have a group here of students from Sloan from different backgrounds, different interests. I think everyone at this point has probably read the description of your background, but it would be great to hear from you. If you could introduce yourself, introduce Nuru, and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you arrived at doing this work.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be joining you guys. So my name's Juliana. I have a background in entrepreneurship and technology, and my experience ranges from companies like Amazon to working for small nonprofits like Empowered Women International in the DC metro area, and then or starting my own company that had to do with ebooks. So I kind of have a broad range of professional experience that has hit a lot of different categories. I went back to school, went to MIT Sloan and HKS to study entrepreneurship in emerging markets. That's what I was originally interested in doing. So started at Sloan and then applied to HKS. And when I was at Sloan, I started looking more into sustainability and pursuing the sustainability certificate. And so started opening my kind of the opportunities I was pursuing during the summer into environment and climate change related internships. And when the opportunity came to join Nuru, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to, instead of working with entrepreneurs in emerging markets, kind of becoming one myself and learning what that experience is actually like, and working in the field of sustainability in a country that has only about 18% of people have access to electricity. And that's like access to electricity. So that means people could have it for a few hours a day or a few hours a week, and they're included in that 18%. So it's one of the most electricity poor countries in the world. So it was really interesting to me to come here and work in an environment where I knew the impact I would have would be such a large one. I originally joined Nuru in 2019 as the director of finance, and then was chief of operations and financial management for about a year. Left when COVID hit, went back to the States, and then rejoined Nuru in July 2022 as Chief People and Sustainability Officer. And so in that role, I'm in charge of HR, ESG, and marketing. So kind of wear many caps, but anyone who's worked at a startup or knows anything about startups knows that's kind of how things operate. Should I talk a little bit more about Nuru?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if you could give us maybe an overview of Nuru. I think people are familiar at this point with Nuru working on this energy access problem, but if you could delve a little bit deeper into how Nuru approaches that problem, like is Nuru a renewable energy developer? Is it a utility? What's the sort of like scope of operations of Nuru?
Yeah, we consider ourselves a utility company. We say we have metro grids because a lot of mini grids, when you're talking about mini grids, especially in Africa, it's a lot of times it's rural mini grids. But we have one rural mini grid in Garamba in the north of the country, but most of the sites we have or will be launching into construction are in cities. So, and we do everything from raising the funds for the project to we do work with EPC partners for the production facility, but we build the distribution network ourselves. We kind of contract to ourselves as EPC partners. Just EPC is engineering, procurement, and construction. And then we run the production facility and distribution network and up to connecting the clients in their homes or businesses to the network. And then we have customer care that's available 24/7 for any clients that are connected. So we do view ourselves as a utility and really focus on providing affordable, reliable, clean energy to our clients. So our clients really come first. And we're always going back to the client experience, always thinking about really raising the bar. And, we believe that that the people here deserve reliable electricity, that they deserve high quality utility services, and that's what we aim to deliver. We started in 2015 in Beni in the north of the country. If you know anything about Congo or follow it in the news at all, you may know Beni because there was the Ebola outbreak in that region. So Beni has seen a lot of conflict and experienced a lot of upheaval. But that's where our founders, Arship Lobo and John, first met. And Beni really started, the site there started out of a desire they wanted to have electricity themselves. So they built a 55 kilowatt site and then kind of launched Nuru, which was Kivu Green Energy at the time. And we're working to build a 1.3 megawatt site initially in Beni while they were raising a Series A to raise investment funds for the 1.3 megawatt site. And then in 2019, I joined, and a few months after, we ended up moving our 1.3 megawatt site from Beni to Goma, just because of regulatory issues we were facing with some illegal concessions that were had in Beni and some issues we ran into. We decided it'd be better to do it in Goma and to move the headquarters of the company to Goma. And so we launched the 1.3 megawatt site in February 2020. And at the time, it was the largest hybrid off-grid mini-grid, solar mini-grid on the African continent.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to maybe take a step back to one of the points in your overview that you mentioned about your time as you entered your Sloan and HKS journey of knowing you want to work in emerging markets, but kind of finding your pathway to sustainability. And I recall from an article you had previously been quoted in the Sustainability Initiative that it wasn't necessarily your goal coming into this experience, that you really wanted to work on climate, really wanted to work on sustainability. And I'm curious to hear if there was like this aha moment for you, or really what that journey to even exploring things like the Sustainability Initiative and certificate, and then ultimately going into an organization like Nuru really was.
Yeah, there wasn't like a single moment that was an aha. It was kind of a collective, prolonged process. But yeah, I've always been like very involved in causes like animals, women's rights, working with refugees and resettlement, just different things. But the environment was never really my passion. And coming into Sloan, I didn't have the intention of pursuing the sustainability certificate, but they were offering some classes that were interesting. So I signed up for them to kind of learn more. And I feel like part of what Sloan and MIT encourage you to do is, explore new avenues and new opportunities. Sorry, distraction outside. It was over the course of taking those classes that I really realized everything I, purport to love and care about is impacted hugely by the environment, which is such a duh statement. But I think a lot of people, if you don't really think about it, you don't really realize how climate change impacts every single one of us, and how anything you care about, whatever that cause may be, and your family members and your day-to-day life and the goals you want to pursue, like all of that is going to be impacted or is already impacted by climate change. We see just here already with the changes in the weather patterns, and farmers will tell you the different things, the problems they'll have in growing things. It's just climate change is very real here. I mean, as it is in a lot of places. But I think it was really eye-opening to me that if we don't address the issue of climate change, like everything else we care about can just descend into chaos, and that really we have to fix what we're doing with the climate and what we're doing with the environment for any of our other actions to matter. And so it was more just kind of like learning about it through the different courses, and about how systems depend on each other, and just opening my eyes to something that is really very obvious when you think about it. But living in a city most of my life and just being very sheltered from a lot of the direct effects of climate change, I hadn't really thought about. And so that kind of was what changed my mind a little. And my first internship I did was with an AeroFarms company that was producing things through vertical farming. And then my second internship was in DRC, and that's kind of what introduced me to the country. But so, yeah, I think there wasn't like a single moment. It was kind of opening my eyes gradually to the fact that this is such an urgent issue, and the very real problems that governments and companies are having tackling it, and wanting to be part of the solution.
Yeah, following up on that, once you arrived at this role at Nuru, how did you go about coming up to speed, given that this was somewhat new to you at the time, both on the energy side of things, right, if you hadn't worked in energy before, as well as in DRC contextual setting? How did you come up to speed on how to go about doing your job in a sector and place that was new to you?
Yeah, well, when I first joined Nuru, that was really when I learned, did like crash course, and I had not worked in energy and did not know much about solar energy beforehand. But I feel like that's one of the pluses with joining a startup, is they kind of take for granted that there's a learning curve, and so that there's a lot of on-the-job learning. But I was responsible for building our financial model, and that's really how I learned all the intricacies of the solar energy and how it worked and how the system would work, and was really through building the financial model, which I originally started out doing the finance certificate, and then switched, and so did not have any experience in financial modeling, so spent a lot of time online learning how to financial model. But I had to really understand the renewable energy ratio, and how the solar panels worked, and how the whole system worked, and how much everything would cost, and how long it would last, and just having to know the company in and out in order to be able to build the financial model. So spent a lot of time with our CEO, and doing online research and talking to our technicians and our technical team to learn all those things to build the financial model. So that's how I really learned the most about solar energy. And then for Congo, yeah, I did summer internship here, but that's 3 months, and I feel like living in a different culture is a lifelong journey. There's always new things I'm learning, and I think there's just it's approaching things with an open mind and an open heart, so that when misunderstandings come up, or things are lost in translation, there's an understanding between you and the person you're working with, that there's no ill intent behind it. So there are, and I'm constantly learning. There are things that are offensive here that you wouldn't think twice about in the States, or society is structured in a certain way that is very different than what we're trying to build as a culture for the startup. So there's a lot of things where it's really a balancing act of making sure you're respecting local culture and local customs while also trying to be a startup and a competitive startup in on an international market and at an international level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building off of that, something like that I'm like very interested in personally, and I think is applicable given many of the audience here is in SEED or is interested in emerging markets or ultimately work like in a multinational organization or context, is how you can really prioritize and like appropriately create these structures to develop locally appropriate solutions or like meeting the organization you're working with where they are. And I think particularly curious if you have any guidance on these like shorter engagements that as a student, whether it's an internship or like a semester-long project we might be working on, and how we can make sure that we're really getting that context quickly and developing solutions that can actually be relevant and at the end of it, like just not wasting the time of the partners that we're working with. I think it's kind of like a fragile interaction you have, especially with a resource-constrained partner in many circumstances. I'm curious how, now being on this end of the table, you might be able to provide some insight.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going in, remembering that you have a lot to learn too. I think, coming out of MIT Sloan, like we're coming with certain credentials and a certain background that is viewed a certain way by people. And there's a lot that we have that we can share and that we can teach other people. But I think it's remembering how much we still have to learn from other people, regardless of their educational background or where they are in their professional career. I think it's approaching things with an open mind. And like I said, being really open about your intentions, because misunderstandings are going to come up. You're going to make assumptions that are wrong. That's just going to happen. That's what happens when you work cross-culturally. There are those stumbles and those obstacles. But if you just approach people as people and build a relationship beyond that. So I know when I came to Congo, for example, it's really important to me that that I go out with my coworkers and that we spend time together on the weekends. And whenever someone invited me over to their house, I always said yes. I just tried to take advantage as much as possible of those opportunities to hang out outside of work. Or for example, lunch. So we offer lunch at work at Nuru, and sometimes, I work straight. I just go, I get my lunch, I go back to my office and I work. But everyone else, goes down and sits down and talks. And I have to remind myself, like, this is a really important time when we're spending time with each other outside of work and getting to know what's going on with each other's families and what's happening in each other's lives. And so as much as like you're tempted to just go straight back to your computer, it's important to really prioritize those times to take those opportunities to get to know your coworkers or your colleagues, and get to know people. And I think being very open and honest, sometimes I think, if you suspect that maybe you said something wrong or someone gives you feedback about that, really approaching it and being very open and honest that that wasn't your intent and you didn't mean to, or it didn't come across the way you meant it. I think just acknowledging that, everyone also understands that you're coming from a different background. So there's a certain leeway you're given, but trying to learn as much as possible about the people around you and about how they operate and how their lives and how they live their lives outside of work is really important and really key.
Juliana, I might pivot back a little bit to where you're describing building out these financial models. I think there's a subset of the audience here that's really interested in like the technical details of what Nuru does and the energy access space. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like how you guys design the size of your system, what sort of clientele you're folding into your distribution networks, how you think about like structuring rates such that you can collect money back on the investment you've made, and whether you're needing to structure in additional like grant-based funding, or whether these metro grids are like turning a profit on their own. Can you talk us through sort of the financial landscape of developing these microgrids?
Yeah. Yeah, those were a few questions. So if I forget answering any one of them, remind me. So we usually aim for, when we're looking at a market, for a 40-60 split between CNIs and households and SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. And we group, although SMEs and households have different rates, we group those together. And so we usually aim for them to be about 60% and for about 40% to be CNIs or anchor clients. We do cash power, so our households and SMEs pay money towards the meter, and then they use up that money. So it's not retroactively paid. And then with our CNIs, it depends. Some pay in advance and then settle up at the end of the month. Some pay us at the end of the month. Some don't pay us, but we try and work on that. So that's how that works. And we do mobile money, so people just with their phone. Mobile money is very common here, so people can just pay through their phone, or we have vendors we work with who are like just third party operators who are on the street, and people can go up to them and they can pay them, and then they'll pay for their meter. And then we also offer, so we just recently launched a program where you can take out a small debt. So say your meter, take out a debt of, $1, $2, $3, whatever the case may be, depending on your payment history, you're accorded a certain amount that you can take out as a debt to just tide you over till the next day, when you can go pay a vendor or pay up on mobile money or something like that. Oh, and so I did refresh myself on the rates in case people were interested on what the tariffs are. So for CNIs, it varies between 32 cents per kilowatt hour and about 48 cents, but it's usually on the lower end. So we make more money off of the SMEs and households than we do off of the CNIs, but the CNIs are anchor clients and again, usually are reliable sources of income. And some of them we have partnerships with them. So like one, for example, Helios Tower is a tower company, telecom tower company that is all across Congo. And so basically any place we put up a new site, we'll have the Helios Towers as customers. So we do different PPAs with them for the different towers. And then the cheapest rate that we have is for mills who are SMEs. And those are like flour mills or cassava mills. And we kind of have a social promotional rate for them, which is 26 cents per kilowatt hour. And then for households, it's a flat rate of 45. And for SMEs, there's a day rate of 38 and a night rate of 48 cents. And this is something people can afford. Our concession, Congo works on a concession basis. So that's why, like, I actually am not a Nuru customer, sadly. I don't live in our concession, but our concession for Goma 1 is in mostly the neighborhood called Indosho, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. And so, but we are able to have customers, and they are able to afford paying our rates. And then, but they do pay, it's cash power, like I said, so they pay. We have, I think, like 300 to 700 transactions a day. So, people are not paying out for a week or a month. They're paying for a couple of days and then re-upping every few days. But it'll be interesting to see when we go into new markets how that changes based on where our concession is. And then, yes, so grants, as it stands now, like, we're way overstaffed. We would not be profitable to just have our current sites. Like, we're built out, and we were built out to have multiple sites, and like the Series B sites that we just closed for and that we're going to be starting construction on, and the Series C sites that we're planning for now. But we do provide a good return on investment. And that is assisted by things like RBF, results-based financing. So for things like different connections, for each connection, we can receive funding through the DRC government, but originally from the World Bank. So the World Bank channels the money to the DRC government, and the DRC government pays us per connection. We do things like PRECs. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with renewable energy credits. PRECs are this new thing. We are actually the first ones to sell them in DRC. And they're called they're peace renewable energy credits. And so they're basically RECs that are in conflict zones or conflict areas. And so we're able to get a premium for them because of that additional component. And then we have we have streetlight projects we do with different companies. So with Microsoft, for example, they funded a streetlight project for the Indosho neighborhood where we operate. And then for Garamba, the one rural mini grid I mentioned, we worked with Google. Google and African Parks helped to fund that, and an EU fund helped to fund that. And that's specifically, is more along the line of the typical rural mini grid when you think of mini grids in Africa.
Awesome. One quick follow up on the financing side of things. I know you mentioned that you raised a Series A, and is that money going towards building out your organization, or are you using that money as project financing as well? I think in the typical utility space, you think of project financing as very separate from company financing, and then in the startup space, you might think of getting a Series A or B to build a prototype or something. It seems like from what you've described, you're sort of blending these two. Am I interpreting that correctly, or can you describe how that works?
Yeah, that's right. Our Series A was really used to build out the company and build our 1.3 megawatt site in Goma, or what we call Goma 1. And then our Series B, which we closed the equity part June 30th, and that was about $40 million. And that was for our Series B sites, which is a total of 13.7 megawatts across for Goma 2, Bunia, and Kindu. And so it goes in part to OpEx and in part to CapEx, but a lot of that, most of that is CapEx. We were just working on the budgets for 2024, and our finance team was slashing left and right because most of that money does go to CapEx and to the insurance. We have to pay for insurance that in other countries you wouldn't have to, on political instability and various things like that you wouldn't necessarily have to in different contexts. And then the logistics here are very complicated and can be very expensive. So a lot of that money goes towards the project. And then I can't give too much details on the debt on the lender's side because that hasn't closed yet, but we're working with lenders for the Series B. And that is more your typical project finance and what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, I think that's great. Maybe a couple more questions and we can open it up to the audience. But you alluded to some of the complexities they're already experiencing, especially as operations continue to scale. I guess, are there some challenges or even bottlenecks that feel most salient and top of mind for you when you think of specifically scaling mini grids, or just near term, what's on the horizon that feels like a big hurdle?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, and John, our CEO, would agree with this, and we've been saying it ever since I first started working with him in 2019, but the biggest challenge is actually not finding capital. Plenty of people are interested in investing in solar energy and investing in Congo. Closing the deal is a different matter, but still, it wouldn't be financing, which many people would think. It's actually HR and finding the right people. So of course that is very top of mind for me since I'm head of HR for the company. But we really do consider, much as obviously I'm an American, we do consider ourselves a Congolese company. About 90% of our employees are Congolese, and we're trying to actually we have about 8 employees who are not Congolese and are not in the country, and we're actually trying to bring that number down so that if we do have any expats that are working for the company, they are based in Congo. Much as it is difficult to recruit people to move here sometimes. But we do really just want to focus on finding local talent, but that can be a challenge for when you're talking about an education system that encourages rote learning and doesn't really encourage creative thinking or entrepreneurial approaches. And a lot of people, we often have to choose between people who have the experience we need, but have spent most of their career in nonprofits, because here, unlike in the US, nonprofits are the cushy jobs. And if you work for a private company, you're usually paid less. So, because just the internet, obviously extractive industries in Congo are among the wealthiest, but the internet aid development industry is really an industry here. And there's just billions pouring in into these NGOs. And so, it's really tough for us to compete with NGOs for talent because they're often offering to pay, 3 times what we can. And then we have to choose between either someone who has worked at an NGO for 20 years and so has a certain mindset, which is very different than what you're facing if you're working at a cash-strapped startup. Because again, Munch's, yes, we raised $40 million. Most of that is not for operations. Or you have to choose someone who, is just out of college or maybe has only had one job. And so there'll have to be a lot of upskilling. But personally, when we have to make those choices, we usually choose the latter. And really focus on finding young Congolese talent who are ambitious and curious and want to learn, and are eager for opportunities and just want to contribute to their community and care about the impact they're having. So HR is one of the biggest challenges for sure. And then logistics is also a big challenge. For Kindu, for example, the way we have to get things there's a train that runs 2 times a year and runs 2 times a year. So sometimes it breaks down and then you're kind of stuck. So, and our other option is flying things in, which would be prohibitively expensive. So, you just have to face things that you just don't think of coming from an American context. You have a very developed road system and highway system, and where there's a tax book law that is very clear that everyone can read, and everyone reads the tax code the same way, and it's very clear which taxes you have to pay and how much you have to pay. And things are just a lot more fluid here and a lot more dynamic.
Amazing, super helpful. Yeah, any questions from the audience? Happy to take those. Otherwise, I'm sure we have plenty more we can pick your brain with.
Hi, Juliana. I'm Andre, a first-year MBA. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I was interested in further learning more about how Nuru thinks about systemic changes in Congo, right? I think Congo has a very dark history, especially in the last 2 centuries, right? It's known to be one of the quote-unquote worst European colonies, and the treatment they got from Belgium all the way to the present with political instability, wars, etc. You mentioned, focusing on local talent, bringing expats to be in Congo, and I think that's already an incredible way of, teaching the fishermen how to fish instead of just giving the fish, right? But what are other ways that you guys think about this? And I'm positive it's somehow part of your mission, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yeah, I love answering questions about Congo. I'm really passionate about the country and the people here, and much to my family's dismay, that's why I moved halfway across the world and bought a home here, and just am really in it for the long haul. But yeah, I think one thing is really, really emphasizing and striving for excellence. I think people too often, both inside and outside the country, can think like it can be just good enough. And we want to change that mindset and be like, no, you should expect and you deserve to have 24/7 electricity, and people are used to not having that and to not demanding a lot from the companies they work with. And so I think trying to set a different tone for what the standard should be. John's our CEO, my boss, was super excited when he heard that one of our clients came to complain because the electricity was off for 2 hours. And he'd been sent a text notification in advance, but that it was off for 2 hours. And this is, again, in a country where like it is normally off and not on if people even have access to electricity. So John thought that was great that the guy came to the site, like traveled from his home to the site to complain that we had turned it off for 2 hours during the day and that it affected his customers because he had come to rely on us being always on. And so kind of changing that mindset to like, that's what people should expect and that's what they deserve. So I think that's one way we try and do it. I think another way is just the work we do with our employees and trying to, again, especially with a lot of our employees are young, trying to kind of help them become the future leaders of the country. You know, HR is, I don't even know if MIT offers HR classes, but I never took an HR class at MIT. It's never something I saw myself doing. But when John offered me the position, I was eager to come back and do that because I love working with our employees. And it's so exciting working with these young people who are like curious and want to change their country and want to see the impact they can have and want to learn as much as possible. And it just, you know, like, that's exciting. You know, doing contracting is not or like people's paid leave is not the fascinating part of my job, but doing professional development and working with people so that, you know, seeing people whom I hired in 2019, who is now a manager of customer care and going to do a program in Belgium. There's a lot of ties still with Belgium. Is, you know, really exciting. Or seeing someone who started as my executive assistant in 2019, who now is head of one of the top people in IT, and just one of like our top talents in the company, is really exciting and really rewarding. And I think, you know, obviously, as much as we want to keep these people and see them move through the ranks, it's also exciting the idea of them leaving and going to other companies or NGOs, and bringing, you know, a different approach and a different mindset that hopefully they can carry that with them, and kind of help spread the word. So I think, yeah, that's kind of how we approach it. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes.
I have a technical question. You said that you have a day tariff and a night tariff, which sort of speaks to the challenge of matching supply and demand with solar. And which maybe, is it lithium-ion batteries? Like, is it clever controls? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so we have a hybrid system. So we have the solar panels. We have at Goma, at all our sites, we have batteries. At Goma, we have specifically Tesla batteries, which were the first Tesla batteries in Congo. And then we have generators, sadly. But because we are really, really set on providing 24/7 electricity, so we do have the generators as backup. And we do have, you know, we don't have a problem with demand. We have 130% utilization rate around, because we're so oversold. So we're eager for Goma 2 to come online next year, to help out with that. But then something we're also working on is hydro interconnections, because there's a lot. There's hydropower in Congo. There's relatively a lot, considering the energy space. There's hydropower in Congo. And so something we're looking at our sites where we can do it. So I think Kindu we can't, but Bunia and Goma we're working on right now is hydropower interconnection. So connection with Virunga Energies. I don't know if you guys may have seen the Netflix documentary on Virunga. It's a national park, but there's also an energy company called Virunga. And so so they have a hydropower plant. So we're working on that, and then we can potentially lower the tariff too, because part of what goes into the tariff is obviously the diesel for the generator. And so that makes the costs quite high. And right now, like I said, our utilization rate is out of control. So we're eager for Goma 2 to come online, so that we can help lower our usage of the generator.
I actually had a follow-up question on one of the points you made about hiring and this kind of challenging trade-off that might need to be made between maybe the younger, maybe less experienced talent and the older talent, this like really deep experience, particularly in the nonprofit space, but maybe not necessarily the right fit. And maybe not an exact parallel, but I think a lot of conversations I've been hearing, especially with HR in the corporate space here in the States, is this like trouble trying to set the right kind of KPIs and make hiring decisions so you can give people opportunity, even if they haven't necessarily had that in the past, but you really see that long term they could be the right fit for an organization. And just trying to like reconcile these gaps in the way that we think about like effective, equitable hiring and really making the right long-term decisions. And I was wondering if that, in your experience, particularly in this new HR role, was a challenging conversation and to like bridge this gap and try to like shift the mindset around how to make hiring decisions and really how to compare these two vastly different backgrounds and sets of professional experiences, and maybe how we could try to bring those into like future boardroom discussions here at different scales to try to bridge those gaps and give broader opportunities.
Yeah, I think you know, it's tough when you kind of have to make those choices. And one of the things you're trying to test for is culture, which is really difficult to do in a couple interviews or a couple tests. But that's what we really try and think of is whether the person is a culture fit. And I think that's where we come up against it mostly with the people who have that long experience but have been working in the nonprofit space and are used to, you know, there being company cars and you know, working set hours and just a more lenient approach to results and KPIs and not investors that you have to answer to and things like that. I think one of the things we really try and do is think of, will this person be good for the company, but also will the company be good for them, you know, because a bad hiring fit works both ways. And so something I try and do is I usually have there's like 3 or 4 interviews that people go through, regardless of the position. So our hiring process is very robust, and then there's usually 2 tests they do online, and make sure that they talk to a variety of people. But usually I have like those, you know, those young stars that we have, like to the people I mentioned, who I hired in 2019. I have them be one of the interviewers. So even if it's not for their team, so that they can kind of see like, you know, what's your sense of this person? Like, do you think they'd fit with our culture? Because they understand the culture and understand what it takes to do well at Nuru, both for yourself, but for the company. So like what it takes for you to be able to deliver for Nuru, but also for you to succeed and be in a place where you can grow and really thrive. Because a bad hire isn't good for anyone. So I think it's a careful balancing act, and you know, sometimes you make bad hires, but we try and be as thorough as possible. It's tough because we have to hire about 300 people in the coming months for the Series B projects, and so I'm getting pressure from the board to obviously speed up our hiring process. But trying to maintain a certain level because we want to hire the right people. And making a bunch of bad hires is going to be bad for the company in the long run. Right. So I'm not sure I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
No, I think it's helpful to kind of understand the dynamic and even some of the push and pull that you're like experiencing in the role that you have. And I think trying to set those expectations early on before you're in the thick of the process. So it's definitely interesting to hear.
Are there any other questions from the audience this time? I have one more follow-up for you. The group that's sitting here, we're all Sloan students right now, and people are interested in sustainability, interested in international work. People are weighing the prospect of jobs in the US versus elsewhere, jobs in what they want to be working in versus what they need to support their families. And as someone who's gone through this, I'm wondering if you have any like parting words of wisdom for how to navigate this sort of search for what comes after Sloan?
Yeah, a lot of pressure there. Yeah, I mean, I think, remember like why you decided to go back to school and why you decided to pursue a different direction and why you left your old job. It was I mean, when John offered me the job, like I have no finance background because to be clear, I had never done finance prior to Sloan. So like my accounting knowledge was like the lemonade book, you know what I mean? And what we learned in accounting at Sloan, and to move to Congo when I was like thinking, oh, I'll live in the U.S. and like work with international entrepreneurs and travel abroad occasionally. It was definitely like a leap of faith, but at the end of the day, like what really drew me to it was the impact I could have was just like there was no way I could turn that down. And also just more in terms of like strategically, you can go in at a certain level and with a certain amount of responsibility at a startup that you can't at an established company. And that applies for both times John has hired me. I don't have a background in ESG besides for my sustainability certificate. And like I said, I don't have a background in HR. But John, having worked with me and knowing me, believed I could take these on and would do well with them. And when he first hired me, the MIT Sloan cred helped a lot, but also that I was willing to move to Goma. Because like I said, it's hard to get people to move here. So I think, if you one advantage to going with a startup is you can start in at a much higher level with a ton of responsibility in a position where you're going to be doing about 5 different jobs. Or if you have a really, precise skill set and expertise, and that's what you want to hone in on, then probably, maybe a more established company is the better route to go. I think also just on a personal note, I, at the time, well, I'm still unmarried and didn't have kids. So it seemed like the right time to move to Congo after grad school. Obviously, if I had a family, that'd be a much more complicated choice. But I think doing these things when the opportunity arises, if you can make it work for the rest of the other aspects of your life, and it just involved me convincing. If an opportunity comes along that's unique enough and where you're going to find fulfillment, definitely take advantage of that.
Fantastic note to maybe wrap on.
Yeah, Juliana, thanks so much for taking time out of your evening to spend with us. It's been a pleasure to hear about what you're working on and how you wound up working on this. And I know that I personally have enjoyed it, and I think there's an audience here that has as well. So thank you.
We're so excited to continue hearing about like your journey on Nuru's work. I think you have a huge fan base over here now. So we look forward to keeping track of the updates.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me and for your interest. And if you guys ever decide to do a Sloan trip to Congo, let me know. I'd be really into that. So you guys should totally do that.
Well, we might be reaching out then.
Yeah, thank you so much.